you like to do?
Doesn't matter. We could definitely sit or stand.
Do you want me to bring a couple chairs?
Yeah,
or?
let's sit.
You'd like to sit?
Thank you.
Okay.
Want to sit?
It's okay. I'll grab some chairs.
We can sit and stand.
Oh, let's just stand up.
All right, guys, while we're just kind of setting some stuff up, there is a QR code with a link to a Padlet. So go ahead and find this. And I'm not sure if we also have this Padlet on the website. Yeah, I sent it. I don't know if it's there yet, but it will be. But I want to give you a little bit of time to be able to access this Padlet. And then I'll tell you about the Padlet. Just give you a second or two. You go ahead if you want to talk.
Are we ready to go, or?
Well, I want to give them a second to access the Padlet.
Okay. We can sit and stand and do whatever, right?
Yeah, we'll just move around. Just give you about 30 seconds. Again, it will be on the MSU link as well. And I'll tell you why I love this Padlet and why I'm doing this. I'll put this back up, so just give you another 30 seconds. I know sometimes it's hard to access these through the QR code. I'm still just learning some of this new technology myself.
There's all sorts of great resources in the Padlet that are always going to be there, right?
Yeah,
It's updated a lot.
Constantly, yeah, thank you. So I will put this back up, guys. If I take it down right now, I promise it'll come back up and I promise you'll see it. But this Padlet, it looks daunting when you see it. I'm putting tons of resources on this. This is my personal Padlet and I'm always adding new resources all the time. So it's one of those things that if you're ever wide awake at 3:30 in the morning and you just can't fall asleep, look at the Padlet. There'll be some article on there that'll help you fall asleep, I promise. So, but there's all kind, I started to bring it down. We're going to talk a lot today about SWW, the School Wellness Wheel, but I also have a lot of resources where it says MBL resources, MBL articles. That really is all about mastery-based learning. Some of the stuff that you guys are doing. So there's these things that are just constantly available, and I want to give you guys access to this. So Jason and I have been talking a lot. We're really happy to be here up on campus.
Yeah, we're Bobcats.
Yeah, we are Bobcats. And this book that we're going to talk about specifically is really a Montana State University document. 3 of the authors are from Montana State. And I want to give you a little bit of background on what this is, and then listen to Jason a lot more than me, but I want to give you a little bit of background and context to this whole thing of the School Wellness Wheel. I think it is the most cutting edge and innovative thing in education today. It's really exciting. It's being adopted at state levels across the country. And really the genesis of this work, the School Wellness Wheel, actually started way back, probably in about 2008. I was a teacher and a football coach here in Bozeman for a number of years, and then I became a principal. And the superintendent at the time, Kirk Miller, asked me to take over our alternative program. And he only gave me one charge. He said, you need to make it a whole lot better. And I really didn't know what that meant, right? So I started to do a lot of research at the time, in 2008, 2009, into competency-based or mastery-based education. We called it performance-based. And that's one of the issues I think that we're talking about today with these initiatives. What is this stuff? Competency-based, mastery-based, performance, what even is this? There's not even clarity on what we're talking about in some of the language, and that's really important. But we implemented, we brought a competency-based model of education to the alternative program. And what I found is when we really started to do it and we got teachers really focused on the right work, what I found is the first thing is we had more engaged kids. Our attendance went up. Our discipline problems went down, our engagement went up, and our achievement went up. So this idea behind mastery-based learning, it works. And so I was so interested in that, that I started to study a little bit more, and I said, okay, this actually works for kids. But the most exciting thing that I found is when we do mastery-based learning, we actually see happier teachers. and more engaged teachers. And I was so interested in that I saw that was what was happening in my program, that I came right back here to school, and that was my dissertation question, that if we do mastery-based learning protocols, do we see happier kids and happier teachers? And I studied with schools all over the country, and that's what we found. And so that was my dissertation, and that led to kind of this book, that to truly get to mastery-based learning, you need everyone on board. You need the kids, you need the teachers, and you need the leaders, and we all need to be pulling in the same direction. And there's certain leadership behaviors to make this happen. So right as Montana is really starting into this whole initiative, we have some resources out and available. And then I finished my career in Bozeman, and now I work with the Marzano group. And I'm fortunate that I get to go work with schools across the country that are doing this work. And I've seen a lot of things that work well, and I've seen a lot of things fail. So I want to be able to help you guys so that you don't make the same mistakes that I see, or the same mistakes that I made. The one thing I'm an absolute world-class expert in is making mistakes and screwing up. I do it all the time. Listen to my wife; she'll tell you, like, even more than I like to admit. But we can benefit from some of the mistakes that other schools have made. So that's the mastery-based. So I really believed, based on this work, that competency-based education was the thing. I truly believed it. I said, man, this is the ticket. We see happier kids, we see happier teachers. This is the way we need to go. This is what research is showing us. Mastery or competency-based instruction and school systems is the ticket. But then I was fortunate to work with a school just outside of San Francisco in the California wine country for a couple of years, which didn't suck. And so, but I was working with this program, and they had it was a program designed for at-risk boys, grades 8 through 12. And I had a lot of time in the alternative program and alternative education. I've seen a lot. But this program I was working in brought in some of the top trauma experts in the world. Guys like Robert Macy from the International Trauma Center, Sandy Bloom some real top-notch people. And the more I started to learn more about the brain and learning and trauma and culturally responsive stuff, I said, we're really missing a huge piece of the puzzle. So that's kind of what led to this concept that we're talking about now of the school wellness wheel. And I just want you to give a second to really kind of look at the diagram and just see what that brings up in you. Because guys, this is a new model of education. And this is what's really exciting that's happening across the country. And we're going to talk a lot about it. And again, you're going to hear Jason a lot more than me. But I just want you to have a minute to kind of look at it and digest it. It's a very simple diagram, but it's loaded. There's a lot in there. So just give you 30 seconds or so. I want you to focus specifically on the middle, on the center. Because we say in schools all the time, kids are at the center of everything we do. Kids are at the middle, right? The kids are at the center of everything. But we know over the last 30 years that's not true. What's been at the center of schools for the past 30 years, since the early 1990s? I'll say it again. I hear testing. I hear standards. I hear content. That's been at the center for the past 30 years. That's the absolute truth. So much so that we become such a standardized school system that we've lost the humanity piece. And the more that I started to think about this idea of mastery-based learning as the key, personalized instruction and all of that, but if we're not addressing the impact of trauma, the impact of culture, mental health, all of this stuff together, it's just the next new thing. So once I started to learn this stuff, the idea is we need to create more healing and resilient-centered education to create healthier people and healthier organizations, and then kids can learn at higher levels. And the way we do that is through mastery-based protocols. That's right at the very top. Trauma-responsive schooling and culturally responsive schooling. So I was fortunate to work with some really top-notch people. And I contacted Jason from our days back in our dissertation, our doctoral program, and we started to put this together. So that's kind of the genesis and really what we're talking about today. And I think this is real exciting stuff. So I want to have Jason give him a little time to jump in.
I like what you said about, or else it's just the next thing, because it's not the next thing. This is really tethered in reality. And as educators, we know that we work with human beings, right? And so this is really work with children, students of all ages, and educators, right? Us. the wellness wheel comes from, it's kind of a metaphor from the medicine wheel.
Yeah.
And in a lot of cultures, there's special places that people would go to receive instruction, maybe healing, guidance, and empowerment. So schools should also be those special places. Thus the school wellness wheel. And a lot of times I think that we don't look upstream to realize what we're experiencing now. That's another way of saying we forget to look at the root of our problems. And so I'm thinking of a study that I was a part of as an educator, I want to say, about more than 15 years ago. But the state studied a lot of the lowest performing schools in our state. And now the weakness of the study was it didn't take upstream issues into consideration. And so a lot of the recommendations that came out from the study didn't help us. And they were quote unquote research-based. But with our state in Montana, you know, as well as all other states, we don't want to be uncomfortable, and we don't want to talk about, you know, the kid from across the tracks, right? You know, we don't want to rock the boat too much. And a lot of our lower performing schools, they had a complicated history here in our state. The Department of Interior just released the boarding schools report. Yeah. The boarding school, yeah, finally. We finally come to terms with this. And so this trauma responsive schooling is really important to our state because we work with students and we work with adults that have been through a lot, and we can't forget about the humanity of this. And the other thing with culturally responsive teaching, it's relevant to everyone. In this country, we talked about how there's some great traditions in our country, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And they're so ingrained in our society, we don't think that we have them. And I have a lot of friends who are non-native, and they think, I have no culture. And I'm like, I celebrate your culture with you annually. Fireworks and Christmas and some great traditions. But I guess I say that to say that the example I gave is I was at a school, and we decided we were going to build upon the culture and the strengths within the community. Yeah. The strengths in the community. So we took what was already there in the community, and we made the school a welcoming place for our students and our parents. So on the gym floor, we wrote the traditional name of the community, Agoshtagat Batchaj. It's mighty few. And we said, and basically the plan was, this is going to be a place for you to live out your values. And the plan, we tied in with those values, we meshed them together. Rather than being an island of otherness, where those kids went in and they didn't feel welcome in their own community, it was, hey, this is the Mighty Few School. Yeah. And we knew it took root after a few years when I heard an 8th grader say to a transfer student, hey, we don't do that here. You know, this is how we achieve here at the Mighty Few School. You know, we achieve, we're about excellence and that spirit of excellence. And it was really powerful to see that rather than feeling it was a place that wasn't for them, it was for them. And so it was really healing. It was really healing for a lot of those students that this was a place where they could live out their values. And because we know that education hasn't always been friendly for everyone, right?
Oh, my goodness, no.
I'll pass the mic back to you.
No, and that's what you're going to get a lot of, Jason and I just kind of having back and forth, because we talk about this stuff a lot. It's unfortunate today when we hear the words culturally responsive teaching that it gets really wound up in a political argument, and CRT is a critical race theory when people don't even understand what critical race theory even is, and it's become this big political... See, now I get all frustrated, see now. But the idea of culturally responsive teaching is actually very simple, and it's nothing that should be any sort of political argument. Here's how learning happens. New learning comes into this part of my brain, right? The prefrontal cortex, right to the big part of my brain. And it's in my short-term memory. The only way that stuff gets to my long-term memory is I take that new information and I make connections with stuff I already know. And those connections is what gets it into my long-term memory. That's authentic learning. Well, where does my earliest learning come from? It comes from my homes, my families, my communities. So why would we not help kids make those connections, right? I always use this example. I'm a city kid. I grew up in Denver, Colorado. Go Nuggets.
Yes.
Right? Finally. But I'm a city kid, and I remember one time we had this big high-stakes test when I was in 5th grade, and they asked us to solve these 6 math problems around a bushel of carrots. I'm like, do carrots grow on bushes, right? Because that's the only, like, I have no idea even what that is. And in my mind, a carrot, they're like that big and they're pointy and they come in bags and you put them on salads. So this idea of me solving a problem around a bush, I don't even know what you're talking about. And we do that to kids all the time. And that's all culturally responsive teaching is. Put it in a context that makes sense.
I would argue, though, that all of us in the room were all great culturally based teachers.
Yeah.
It's just that a lot of times we haven't taken the care and the time to reframe a lot of what we already know. Yeah. Our whole school system is based on culture. Schools are not neutral, we know that, but yet it just takes a little bit of tweaking to match up with your students' culture, whatever that might be.
Right. Take the time and the commitment to know who the people are in front of you. So really that's what this is, the wellness wheel. It's how do we take this system that's been standardized for so long and humanize it. And one of the things I want to show you guys today is something that's brand new, hot off the press, is a school wellness wheel 2 that hasn't even, it's just in the earliest stages, and you guys here in Montana State are going to be the first to see about it. But here's what we know, and I think this is why this is why this is so important. We know more about the brain and learning today than we ever have. And this is the one opportunity that we have, guys. I truly believe we have a once-in-a-century opportunity to really change how the school system operates. COVID actually helped us that way. Right? Because when people finally came back after quarantining and after online learning, what I heard from people all the time is, oh man, thank goodness we're going to get back to normal. Whew. You guys know we're not going back to normal. It's not going back to what it was. We have an opportunity now to make a new normal. And everyone's waiting for someone else, what they tell us, what the state legislature, everyone's waiting for someone else to give us permission or to do something different. Guys, I'm going to tell you something right up front. The legislature, they don't know what the heck's going on either. So they're not going to be here like this magic 10 commandments coming from Mount Sinai, giving you the direction. It's not going to happen. What we need is schools doing some amazing things that the legislatures can pick up and say, this is the way schools have to operate. The state of Vermont, way back in 2010, mandated mastery-based education for every school in the state. And it failed. Not because it wasn't a good idea, but because they didn't give people the why or what it looks like. They just said, you guys go do it. And then people, what they do is they try and fit this new mandate into what they already do, and it doesn't actually move forward. This is our chance to move things forward. But the focus has to be on the healing and the resilience and the growing of the kids first. Did you know right this year, we have 2 million fewer kids in our school system across the country than we did 2 years ago? 2 million fewer kids. Kids didn't come back. And we've got 500,000 fewer teachers in our school system. Teachers aren't coming back. So let's just get back to normal. And I asked this, hey, we're finally back to normal. How was this past year for you? Right?
It's not normal. I think the pandemic forced everyone to reevaluate what's important in their life. And as schools and as educators, we need to take advantage of the time to reshape, reform, and do school better.
Absolutely.
We're moving from the industrial model.
We have
There's no choice that we're moving.
Yep.
And one thing I like about the school wellness wheel is there is a clear roadmap. Mm-hmm. A lot of this, I think, sometimes feels like we're drinking water out of a fire hose. It's like there's so much new information, and where do I even start? But there's a step-by-step process, and it's really clear, and I'll let Mike talk more to that, but we do need to continue to think about the well-being of our staff, ourselves, and our students. And Superintendent Mike Tatsi in Heart Butte, I remember when he took over Heart Butte, he said, and I paraphrase, and forgive me, Mike, because I'm being recorded, so I might, Mike. So he said, to heck with the test scores. I'm going to do what's right for my students and my staff. And when he started focusing on his students and their well-being and his staff well-being, then academic achievement was affected.
Yeah.
And we all know Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? The wellness wheel, and it shows you how to live it out in your school. Side note, we do acknowledge that it came from the Blackfeet tribe, right?
Yeah. A lot of people don't know that, right? Maslow misappropriated all the stuff for the his hierarchy of needs. Actually, the vast majority of his knowledge, and he used a lot of researchers at the time, but it came from Blackfeet Nation, his work in Blackfeet Nation in 1938. In fact, what a lot of people think is that Maslow's hierarchy, the triangle, was designed according to the Blackfeet teepee. He didn't say that, though, right? He just kind of took all the information for himself.
Mike,
so,
this is something that I really admire you. Like,
oh, man.
This is a work of courage, even to say that and to talk about these issues that a lot of our communities feel and know. Mm-hmm. And then Mike being an ally and with everyone else involved in the project and saying, let's do what's right for kids. Because we're all doing what's right for a lot of the students. Let's create a model that fits every school and is right for every kid.
And I want Jason to speak to that too here, that because of our Montana connection, in my opinion, when we talk race in this country, we tend to make it a black-white issue all the time. Native American voice has been squashed, right, historically. So we really made sure that when we did the school wellness wheel, Jason was absolutely instrumental in talking to different elder groups and making sure that we weren't misappropriating and we weren't being inappropriate with this. And I don't know if you want to speak to that process, but we really tried to honor the Native American voice in this moving forward. It's fundamental to what we do. So it's got a huge Native American and a huge Montana connection. And let's just change the world from here, right now, with us. So I don't know if you want to speak to that.
Well, we know there's a lot of misappropriation, right? But this, I visited with a lot of people I know and said, hey, this is what we want to do, and are you okay if we share this, how the medicine wheel is, but we're not going to reveal any insider information. And, well, we're in Bozeman, we know there's a lot of kind of interesting stuff going on, right?
Yeah.
I say that tongue-in-cheek, healers and native experts who are not native and stuff. It's not one of those works. It's not. And it's been really powerful. How many states have adopted it in their schools now? 8?
Yeah.
Was Utah the most recent?
Yeah. Missouri, it's happening down in Alabama. It's happening everywhere.
And it just makes sense because it's tethered in reality. It's like, hey, this makes sense. And for me, in my research and scholarship, it was helpful, like, okay, let's do this in schools. It's a good roadmap because when a student knows something, they know it. Like if somebody to me, and I'll use the example of riding a bike, can write a report about riding a bike, name all the different pieces of a bicycle, or even all the different ways to say bike, bicycle, and whatever, and the different types, but if they can't ride a bike, they probably don't know it, right?
They haven't mastered it.
They haven't mastered it. So the proficiency skills here are just phenomenal.
Yeah. And when we talk about that move to mastery-based education, there's lots of ways to do it. I've been really fortunate to work with Dr. Marzano, Bob Marzano, for the last 10 years as we start to put this thing together. And I just met with him over the last few days. We had a big retreat. And he said there's a lot of ways to do mastery-based education. We have a way using proficiency scales, aligning assessments, and all of this stuff that makes it happen in the field. But the bottom line still is this, and I think this is important, and I want to preach a little bit. We now know today, more than like we ever have, like I said, that trauma, toxic stress, has an impact on the brain, especially the brain of developing kids. So we know that to be true. That's no longer anything that's debatable. So here's the question. If we know trauma and toxic stress is widespread, and we're seeing it a lot differently than we used to, we're defining it differently. It's not just ACEs, it's not just those kids from those homes, it's everywhere. That's what's really responsible behind kids not coming to school, behind the disengagement, behind the violence. That's what's coming out right now. Do you guys know suicidality? When I use the word suicidality, and I say suicidality in kids, what grade level do we tend to think about? We tend to think high school, right? And there's a reason for that. The Youth Risk Behavior Survey was a survey that was given to kids all over the country for years, over 20 years. And they would always try and figure that out. What does suicidality look like? And the results were remarkably consistent. It was somewhere around 17-ish%. Some years 16, some years 19. But 17 to 18% of kids, they said, had some sort of suicidal ideation. And as a society, we got kind of used to that. Like, 17% of kids have been suicidal. Well, that's not good. But it could be worse. And we just got used to that. But there was a really big study, and it's in the Padlet, the study I'm telling you about. Everything that we talk about is in there, where they actually looked at a 10-year time period. It was more of a longitudinal study. And what they found is that suicidality actually had gone up almost 2.5 times over a 10-year period. And the age groups they were talking about was grades 5 to 17. So it's everywhere. It's manifesting itself in that. We're seeing much higher levels of trauma, much higher levels of stress, much higher levels of suicidality. We now understand generational trauma and how that can be passed on. So this stuff is everywhere. And we know that it impacts the brains, especially of the developing brains of kids. So the question is, if that's true, if we know that trauma and toxic stress over time can damage the brain, the question is, are there things we can do to heal that, to reverse that? And the good news, guys, is there are. In fact, the same strategies that we can use to heal traumatized brains, when we talk about building relationships, mindfulness practices, just a lot of the stuff Jason was talking about, that can literally heal traumatized brains and build resilience in non-traumatized brains. So the role of schools moving forward now becomes, how do we still continue to teach content and have high-level expectations, while at the same time facilitating healing and resilience? And that really is what the school wellness wheel is all about, that we have the ability to strengthen and repair brains, and learning by definition is an act of the brain, so why aren't we focused on that? But we need our teachers to have a different perspective. It's not my job just to teach 180 days of stuff at kids. It's my job to say, okay, here's real important standards and things my kids should know, and I need to help them learn it. A doctor doesn't wake up and say, here's what I'm going to do at my patients today. I gave you the medicine, man up. Right? The whole point is, what is it I want, and how do I help get my kids get there?
And speaking of that, we've seen that trauma is in the epigenetics, right?
Absolutely.
It shows up in the DNA, but yet school-age children are at the age where their brains are really malleable, and with these strategies or approaches, trauma can be healed. And it might seem simple, but having a positive connection, building positive relationships, those are pathways towards healing, and not only on an individual level, but community levels. Because there's generational trauma, community trauma. With the boarding schools report that came out, one of the recommendations that came out was language revitalization. Because Native American languages are federally protected by law. And language revitalization heals trauma. Not just individually, but in families. For example, in some tribes, there's worlds that exist in the language that are not in English. And so within the different terms for family members, within those terms are expectations for a brother to a sister, or a sister to a brother, or families towards each other, aunt towards her nieces and nephews. So inside those native terms for the family members, healing can take place, reknitting of family structures that have, I guess, been attacked by assimilative processes. And one interesting thing was, I was in Oklahoma, Mike, and there was a Cherokee elder, and they created some language programs over there, and they have elders who come and live around the school in housing, and they receive a stipend for working with students. But he was telling me that in their language, there's no opposites. I was like, what? He said, you know how in English there's opposites? Up versus down.
Wow.
Or black versus white. So in that worldview, there's no opposites. And so there really is different worlds contained in different languages.
Yeah.
But these types of efforts heal trauma. And not just at the, we're talking at the individual level, because some of our kiddos have been through a lot.
Yeah. And our teachers too.
Yeah. The secondhand trauma, and it's a contagious physiological response. If you have people in trauma and a teacher comes in, and it's contagious, right?
And that's important. I don't need to stop Jason right now. That idea of vicarious or secondary trauma, teachers are actually at the second highest risk out of all the major professions for secondary or vicarious trauma. We only trail police officers, first responders, people who see really bad things every single day. Next up is us. So how does that make you feel, right? That stuff is real, and it's here, and it permeates everything. And it's the thing we don't want to discuss. Because, you know, it's kind of the old American way. Life's tough, baby. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps and move forward. And we're now starting to see that not necessarily is that the case. Right? We can do better. here's one of the things I want to talk about too, and then have Jason continue with this. Again, guys, we have never known more than we do today about the brain, trauma, stress. After decades in research about all of this stuff, this is not new information that I'm sharing with you. In fact, in 2012, the American Association of Pediatrics actually issued a policy statement and a technical report. And it was a document signed off by over 60,000 doctors that said, hey, this idea of trauma, stress, all that stuff that it does to the brain, that it does to the bodies of kids, that it does to us, that it does to society, this is something everybody needs to know about. This was so powerful, again, that this trauma will weaken brain architecture. It affects learning capacities. It's going to impact adult productivity later. We need to get this out to everybody, and it was signed by 60,000 doctors. Now I ask you, who in here has read the American Association of Pediatrics report from 2012 about the impact of trauma and stress on the brain? I've got one. One in the room, that's it. If you're interested, it's in the Padlet. But what's awesome about this is I got disappointed. It's like, man, if that organization, a group that powerful, can issue this statement telling us what's right in front of us, and nothing happens, it's hopeless. Oh my gosh, but then it hit me. Guys, it's not hopeless because there's one organization that has the ability to touch everybody. And that's the schools. Schools are bedrocks of communities. And schools now need to look at things. We have this immense potential to literally buffer the effects, the damaging effects of trauma and things moving forward so that kids can learn better. And I will tell you, I get to work with Marzano now, and I get to work with schools all over the country. Guys, I've worked with literally 500 schools trying to implement competency-based education. And it's a struggle. I see more people fail than succeed. I see more failure than success. If you guys want to see some successful schools, Lindsay Unified School District in California does some great work. They were one of the first districts in the country to actually start at the high school level and go backwards. They started in about 2008, doing a lot of work with Marzano. They were one of the lowest performing school districts in all of California. A lot of poverty, a lot of trauma, and they started and they went backwards, and they've totally shifted. So Lindsay Unified School District is really good. When I was first starting this work with my program here in Bozeman, we got on a plane and went and visited Lindsay. I said, I just need to see what it looks like. And I would come back thinking, oh gosh, that's good, but we can do better. Westminster Schools in Colorado, really good stuff. I just met with them last week. Westminster Schools is doing some really good work around competency-based education. I made a presentation on Wednesday at Northern Cass, just outside of Fargo, North Dakota. Those are 3 schools and districts that are really doing some high-level stuff around competency-based or mastery-based schooling. But I made this presentation about the wellness wheel to the folks in Northern Cass, again, just last week. So they're understanding that, yeah, this is the role of schools. And what's exciting about this book, Jason and I talk about this a lot, is there's this huge need to take, we all know this stuff. We have great research in biology and brain science and psychology and education, but we act in different silos. We finally need one thing that starts to bring this all together. The brain science. What I actually like to talk to teachers about is I say, your job moving forward is not to teach kids. Your job is to help kids learn stuff. Because it doesn't matter if you taught it if they didn't learn it. So you need to be an expert in the learning process. So your new job moving forward is you're actually doctors of learning. That's a pretty sweet title, right? I wonder if there's a pay increase, a subsequent pay increase that goes with that.
We need to pay our teachers more, right?
Absolutely. But that's kind of what the wellness wheel is. I love what Dr. Cantor says. There's this great need in the field to take all of this knowledge from biology, neuroscience, psychology, education, and social science and put it together in one framework. Dr. Sandy Bloom, another great leader in the field of mental health, we have to have a new conceptual framework for thinking about deep collective change. Guys, what we're talking about here, just with the mastery-based or proficiency-based, this is a massive shift. This is a heavy lift. It's not just the next new thing and we'll tweak a couple things. This is true second-order change. And so we need kind of a new framework that really recognizes the humanity of everybody involved, the kids and the teachers. And really that's kind of what's moving forward in this Montana State document that, again, I think is pretty cool. Marzano himself said this is kind of the way that schools are going to make the shift. So we're out there kind of talking about some amazing things and where we are in the field today. Jason and I wanted to talk, but we also wanted to open it up. No one's supposed to know this, but Jason actually works in Washington, D.C. right now. Shh. Don't tell him, Mike. It slipped, brother. Right? So he's seeing things across the country. I work with schools all over the country. And so again, we can bring the benefit of our experience and the things that we've seen and maybe start to help with this. But I'm so excited that my home state is here really doing some great work, and we can really push this thing moving forward. My vision is Montana leads the nation in education, and we teach other schools how to do this.
Yes.
So let's do that.
I think I want to add to this, the one really powerful thing about mastery-based learning, or whatever we're going to give it, right?
Yeah, whatever term we're going to call it.
Whatever term, is agency.
Yep.
Everybody think about Psych 101, the locus of control. You know, students are born with this sense of agency where they choose what they want. And for a lot of our communities, historically, agency was literally taken away by force. The locus of control was damaged, where federal policy by force, students, families weren't given agency over their own lives. And we know when agency is affected, then a negative effect can be learned helplessness. But with mastery-based learning and the other approaches that we're talking about, agency can be restored. You know, will, choice, and that's a very powerful thing. Students knowing what they're going to learn and putting forth intention towards learning that, instead of just, all right, we're on page 1, and we're going to move through our materials.
Yep, 180 days of stuff.
Yeah, even restoring teacher agency.
Yes.
It's powerful stuff.
Yeah, guys, really, I want to talk to you. This took me a long time to figure it out. Just shows you how smart I am, right? Because it took a long time to get to the bottom of this. But mastery-based, and what language should we call this here? What is this? Mastery-based, competency-based, proficiency-based?
Proficiency/competency-based.
Great. That's a lot of words. The reason we used mastery-based in the book was because people were getting caught up in, is it competency-based, is it standards-based, is it standards reference, blah, blah, blah. Really, it's this simple. What do you want kids to know? How do you know where they are in that learning progression to get to mastery? And how do you help them bridge that gap? That's really all it is. So it really allows you to kind of get to the humanized thing instead of, but here's what my curriculum says, and I have to be, the pacing guides, Jason says I have to be here. Well, learning is messy, right? Learning is not linear. So really it's that simple. What is it you want kids to know? How do you know where they are? And how do you help them? And if we can actually make it that simple, we can then start to shift things. So in this book, we try and do that too. One of the things that holds schools back is grading. How do I grade this? What does a report card look like? What about a GPA? That's why I never use the term standards-based grading, because then the focus is on the grading. The focus needs to be on the learning. Once we can really start to put the focus on the learning, the grading thing will come later. All right, so that's the idea really behind mastery-based learning. What is it you want them to know? And then how do you help them get there? That's why people got into this field. I do this activity all over the country when I visit schools. I ask people right off the bat, can you just have a conversation at your table? Why did you get into this field? Why are you doing this job? You could have gotten a job that paid you a lot more money. Or you could have been like the other 500,000 teachers who've left. Why are you doing this job? And I ask them, and I always hear really exciting things or, really heartfelt reasons why people got into teaching. You know what I never hear when I say, why did you get this job? Why are you doing this job? I never hear this. Well, grades. Grades are like my thing, man. Like I wake up in the morning and all I want to do is go to school and grade kids. Like I can't wait.
Want to grade papers.
Yeah, never hear grades. Here's the other thing. Why did you get into this field? I never hear, because that English curriculum was so inspiring to me that that's all I wanted to do. I never hear people talk about grades and curriculum. But what do we spend all our time as teachers talking about? Grades and curriculum. We need to start talking about the kids in the classroom and us. How do I become the healthiest me so that I can grow healthier people? We worked with a school district in Little Rock, Arkansas, Cloverdale Middle School. And I hope I have the little picture here. Cloverdale was one of the lowest performing schools in all of Arkansas. High poverty, high teacher turnover, tons of trauma. They called it Clover Jail, is what even the people who went there. Okay, they totally adopted the wellness wheel as their framework and started to get into mastery-based learning. And literally within 2.5 years, a lot of things shifted. Now, they're not perfect. They like to say we're not in the land of done. But they had the biggest increase in the state of Arkansas in terms of attendance for 2 years in a row. Governor actually had to go and acknowledge them. Their scores went up. Their teacher turnover went down because they started to humanize it. Kind of like you said, I don't worry about the test scores. I want to worry about healthy kids. And then the test scores go up. So that's kind of some of the stuff we're talking about. I do in a little bit want to show you kind of the new wellness wheel, but all so far it's just been me and Jason talking at you. I want to see if you guys have anything or any questions just from our experience and our expertise that we might be able to help you with. Please. And thanks for raising your hand first. Yes, I worked with lame deer a number of years ago. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I wish I had some of my slides readily available. I can share some afterwards. At Cloverdale, for example, they start every single staff meeting with a mindful moment. And it's actually really cool. The very first time I was talking about this and the impact of trauma on the brain, and I said, we're going to have a mindful moment. I want you just to close your eyes. We're just going to have a little 3-minute breathing thing. And I remember looking at people, and people were sitting, but there was a lot of this. They didn't really feel comfortable with but now, when you have men, they start every meeting. And then the teacher started to do it in their classrooms. We didn't have to tell them because the teacher said, I actually feel better when I'm starting to do this. I had one teacher from Cloverdale. I went back to work with them in February. It was in the winter. And I walk in and she says, hey Mike, can I talk to you for a second? I said, yeah. And she said, come into my room. I want to show you something. I said, okay. So we go to her room. And she's a lady, and she is a self-described rough around the edges lady. She's been doing this field for a long time. She's a little rough around the edges. And she said, Mike, when you started talking about some of that mindfulness and breathing, and I got to tell you guys, that was outside my comfort zone. I was a teacher and a football coach for 20 years, right? Did it right down here in Bozeman. I'm a football coach. I yell at people and things happen. That's what I'm used to in my brain. And so this idea of mindfulness seemed a little woo-woo to a guy like me. But I was fortunate to work and co-author a book about bringing mindfulness to schools a number of years ago, and it shifted me, and I started to do it different. My own kids say, Dad, you're different. And so this lady, this rough around the edges lady, she said, Mike, you're talking about this stuff, and I think it's a bunch of but I'm towards the end of my career. I got a bunch of kids who are either not coming to school. When they come to school, there's behavior issues. 7th grade boys, they're nuts anyway. And so she said, I didn't know what to do, so we started doing it. And I thought the kids were going to push back. She said, I tell you what, I do it first thing in the morning and then first thing after lunch. Those kids look forward to it. Now I get nervous. What happens if I'm not there? Like, will the sub continue? But I don't have to worry about that anymore because when the sub comes in, the kids say, whoa, this is how we roll here. And they went, we have data on this. They went from having, usually by the end of the year, they would have had roughly around 130 to 140 fights in the year, some sort of physical confrontation. They went from having 140 fights to 4. And I walked into a classroom one time. I was in the office, and it was after lunch, and there was this one kid who everybody knew because he's kind of that kid, and he walks into the office right after lunch, and he's like this, and we're like, oh man, we got to jump in. And one of the assistant principals went to try and calm him down, and he goes, just leave me alone. I just need a place for my mindfulness. I just need my mindfulness. And he goes into a room and he sits down. We close the door. Literally 4 minutes later, he comes out. Bro, you good? Yeah, I'm good. And he goes back to class. So practicing with the teachers first, we have to start with the adults in the room first. So that's just one example. I've got tons. But we have to start with the grown-ups. Guys, we have a traumatized teaching staff, traumatized teaching community. We got to take care of our grown-ups first. If you have COVID and you bring that to school, what do you bring into school? COVID. And if you're dysfunctional and stressed, what do you bring into your classes? That. So we need to work with our adults first and then grow it with our kids. Also, I'm working with the Belcourt Reservation in North Dakota, bringing their 7 grandfather teachings. I had Jason zoom into one of the meetings I had with them. They've actually created proficiency scales around their 7 grandfather teachings and trying to bring that alive in their population as well and in their schools. So that's just some things.
Some of the practical things that we've experienced is having team meetings, and it comes from the leadership. Leadership wanting to, I guess, improve the wellness for the teaching staff and the team. And what we did was realize that a lot of the verbiage of some stuff was not really relevant to our teaching staff, and they would kind of push it away. Because to be a high-achieving person, a lot of us have learned we ignore our own feelings, right? We ignore our own well-being to achieve. But that's not sustainable. So for us in our school, what we did with this, we just call it taking care of yourself. Because for me, and when I hear self-care, I get an image that is not me. Cucumbers on the eyes and a facial, and if
you look hot that way, bro. I
probably would, but just kidding. But that's not for me, and I know that it wasn't for a lot of our staff. So we just rephrased a lot of stuff like, how can you take care of yourself? How do you take care of yourself? What rejuvenates you? And when we had training on that, and a lot of our teachers would say, I like to be with my grandkids. That rejuvenates me. Or I like to do beadwork. Or I like to walk. I like to visit with my friends. So, and helping our staff to incorporate that into their daily practice, and then exposing them to stress-relieving techniques such as mindfulness, and letting them know it was safe. We did, Mike did the Wim Hof method with us, and you should
breathing method.
All 50 of us doing the Wim Hof method, and opening one eye and looking at each other. And
what's this guy talking about? Yeah.
But that's what we've done together as a staff, and I hope that answers. And just, it takes the leadership, though, to let staff know that their well-being, their health is important, because if we don't have our health, how are we supposed to take care of the students' health with whose care we're charged with?
The leaders have to model this. The leaders have to practice it themselves so that the teachers feel safe to do it, and then the teachers will naturally start to then bring it into the classrooms. But it's a whole lot better than to say, okay, we're going to do mindfulness. We're going to have mindfulness minute in every single. That's a good idea, but it doesn't work. We need people to adopt this.
That's what we do with trauma.
Yeah,
we're going to learn how to be more trauma informed and practice trauma informed practices. And we did trauma last week for a half hour. I'm good.
I think we're good there.
I'm good. I had a workshop. I'm done.
I actually had a principal tell me that. We were doing a training. He said, oh, wait, we did 2 days of trauma training at the last 2 days of school like 2 years ago. We got this. I said, you did 2 days of training 2 years ago at the last day of school, and you got this? Like, really? You had the PD? Show me where this is alive. Show me where this is happening. So I think that's why it's important, guys. I work with schools all over the country, and the schools I see who are not moving to mastery-based or competency-based or personalized competency-based, proficiency/competency-based based on the standards. The reason I see folks fail is they make it a technical thing. Oh, they start with the report card. They start with this stuff. We've got to start with more of the center stuff and then grow it out. And when teachers finally see that this personalized or proficiency-based schooling actually makes teachers' jobs easier, I will tell you that right up front. Once we make that shift to personalized, proficiency, competency-based education, it makes teachers' lives easier. I've seen it happen. It takes a lot of the pressure and the stuff that you're forced to do off the table. So I don't really think that I've heard people say they disagree with the concept. What they don't know is how to do it. And that's what we're here to do. And in Montana, I like how the people have said, let's get folks together. I just put some folks in North Dakota together with some folks in Vermont. That's one of my jobs, I think, moving forward. It's not just bringing in some consultant like me to talk at you. I need to get people doing the same work and get them talking to each other. When I went and visited Lindsay Unified School District in California, now I can start to see it, and now I have some other folks, and now we can start building those connections. Well, why don't we do that here in Montana? And we now, especially with technology, we can communicate and collaborate so much better and pull this thing together. So I do want to show you in just a second School Wellness Wheel 2. No one's seen it. Me and Jason and a few others. But any questions so far with this whole thing? Because we're just throwing a lot at you from a lot of different directions. But any other thoughts or questions? Please.
Outside of school, stresses and trauma,
Yeah.
community and family and neighborhood, and things that the school doesn't have much control over.
Mm-hmm.
And when children come in, and that is outside my wheelhouse of addiction, law enforcement, poverty, and all of those things, it just speaks to that.
The research shows that a positive classroom environment with an informed teacher is more influential than the forces of poverty.
Yep.
So having those skills to build connections with your student and to lead them towards positive behaviors and a positive connection with school is more influential on their life than poverty. Because teachers can change the world. And I'm not saying that willy-nilly, but there's research behind it. And I'm thinking of a teacher right now I worked with, this really great teacher, and had this down, just had it figured out. And had all of the decorations in her class were all created to create connections with their students, whether it was football or basketball or superheroes or whatever. And it was a Super Bowl time coming up, and one of the students came up and said, Mr. Cummins, what's your favorite football team? And I said, I don't really follow football.
I forgive you, brother.
And then afterwards she said, you dropped the ball. And I'm like, what? She said, I don't follow football either, but you had a chance to connect with him. I was like, oh, geez. And she said, why do you think I have all these little things on my keychains and this magic school busy type environment? I'm trying to build connections with my students. And I was like, okay, and so it was a learning experience for me, just having that good connection with her students. So.
And I think that's really important what Jason's saying. The research is clear. There is the single biggest factor in terms of learning in a classroom is the quality of the teacher. And the quality of the teacher can literally, in many cases, counterbalance poverty. Now, it's not going to counterbalance everything. And we are still going to maybe work with kids and teach them some mindfulness practices, and then they still go home to their communities of violence in the homes they live in. But at least they got a shot if we're doing this stuff with them. And I use this example. When you get to the high school level, think of this. Kids take 2 years of PE, right? And it's just, they got to get through this stuff to get the credit and they move on. Well, really what PE should be is physical fitness. And really what we're talking about is mental fitness. And what if every kid in the United States got 13 years of consistent mental fitness training over the entire course of their lives? And they learned how to regulate, and they learned those things that really can help you learn at a higher level and can grow brain capacity and mental health. If kids got 13 years of training in that in school, boy, at least they got a shot. Because they are still going to go home to those communities. But they're going home to those communities right now without anything. So if we're able to give them those on a regular basis, man, they got a shot. But you're right, it's not going to. But what they say in Cloverdale is if we want to change Little Rock, we're going to start right here in Cloverdale. We grow healthy kids who become healthy people. That's how we change our community. Oh, yeah.
I think just connections with the community and allowing authentic parental voice in our schools, because we know sometimes we'll have the parent committee, but we only let them speak to prescribed issues. Because do we really want the feedback into our schools? Do we really want that? We should want that. And connecting with the community to see what the community thinks of environment, the environment around the school, what's important to them, whether you're in Yak, Montana or Lodgegrass, Montana. Is Yak a place? It's a Yak.
Yak. It's in Washington, isn't it? Yakima. I don't know.
No,
Yak, Montana?
there's a Yak, Montana. Or I'll just say Bab. Is it here in Bab or Billings?
Thank you for asking questions and participating. Anything else?
Speak to how this is not just identifying trauma, but it's like, all right, we know it's there, but where do we go from here? Or you don't have to, but
No, I'm trying to see. I'm trying to figure out where you're asking me.
because we were discussing yesterday that the ACEs study and all that, but where do we go from there?
I think the bottom line is this, and I think this is really powerful. This is kind of Wellness Wheel Part 2. You guys are the first people in the world to see this. It's just been
Nice
accepted
segue,
for
huh?
publication.
See that segue?
I'm on it, Jason's on it, and we've added another co-author named Danielle Dickey. If you need to know someone, look up Danielle Dickey. He's one of the top literacy experts in the world. What he's done is amazing. So Jason, Danielle, and then Libby Child, she's actually my wife, but she was a special ed coordinator, so she has an immense knowledge. And really what we're talking about with School Wellness Wheel 2 is just how do you start to build these actual strategies in classrooms with kids and with teachers. So if you look at the center here, still healing and resilient-centered education. We need to humanize this thing and not standardize it anymore. There is no field that is more human than ours. And there's no job that's more challenging. I actually had a teacher one time tell me we were bringing in instructional coaching, and he goes, coaching? Psh, I've been doing this 20 years. I think I know what I'm doing. I don't need a coach. You know, like you've got human learning figured out. Nobody's got that figured out. There's nothing more challenging or human than us. So we've got to start with that. Start growing healthy people. But we used special words that can kind of really get down to the middle. So how do you build a healing and resilient-centered education? You focus on the literacy, the equity, the agency that Jason talked about, building resilience and building brains. So that's really the focus of what schools should do. Right there in the center. How do we do it? Well, at the very top, it's still called mastery-based learning, and we use the term voice, right? Well, how do we get voice and autonomy, get kids to own their own learning? You see higher levels of optimism for teachers, right? But here is really kind of the nitty-gritty. Instruction is personalized, clear learning goals, learning progressions. That's using proficiency scales, aligning your assessments. That's the technical part of teaching, and we work with schools to do that. How do we make that stuff happen? But as you notice, we've changed the language, and this I think might have been what Jason was referring to. Instead of trauma responsive, because trauma has become kind of a buzzword, so much so that I just call it the T word, because we just call it trauma. We just throw trauma around. And sometimes we get so caught up in the trauma that we live in the trauma. We need to get out of that and talk about recovery from trauma, right? Because when you break a bone, you break an arm, and they heal, what do doctors always tell you happened to that part of your bone that broke? Comes back stronger. Why don't we focus on that? Growth-based schooling. And we do that by creating a positive environment, building efficacy in kids, their well-being and wellness and mindfulness and relationships, teaching them how to emotionally regulate themselves so that they can really learn at the highest level in whatever they do down through the rest of life. So we moved from trauma-responsive schooling to growth-based schooling. It's much more from a positive perspective. And we moved away from culturally responsive, because I got to tell you, if you go to some places, I was just in Texas. Don't be using anything like culturally responsive. Oh, you don't use those words here. Literally, I was told that. Mike, you cannot use that word. Culture? Like, okay. Why don't we call it strength-based teaching then? So that's really what that whole thing is about. And we use the term CHAMP because it is still about culture, build culture in community, hope in kids and teachers, give them access to the content. We know a lot of our kids can't read at grade level, and one of the number one reasons that is they lack vocabulary. If kids lack vocabulary, they can't even access the curriculum. But we just keep hammering through this. Let's just keep going, man. I got stuff I got to do. I got to be to chapter 3 by Tuesday. I got to go. If the kids can't access the curriculum, you're not doing, like, what the heck are we doing, right? And then we're banging our head against the wall because their test scores aren't going up. Because we're not addressing what we really need to address. If you really want to address stuff, build kids' brain health. Then they'll learn better. So this is Wellness Wheel 2. It's in production right now. It'll be out, and it's going to take a little bit of time. But this is going to be a really massive game changer. And I've got all kinds of videos and pictures of what this stuff could look like in classrooms. We don't have time for that now, obviously. But this is kind of what we're talking about. And I don't know if I hit on what you were talking about, just
Yes,
the
you did.
strength-based perspective.
And he's not joking. You know, I've been doing a little bit of traveling myself, and in some regions there's certain words you can't say. Don't say mental health here, say student wellness.
True.
Oh, don't say wellness here, say
Mindfulness.
don't say that
don't
there.
say that.
Anyways, but
Yeah.
bringing me back to why did we get into teaching? You know, I got into education because I wanted to help my community. I wanted to help my community. And if there was a better way to help my community, I would have found it. You know, schools, we have the access, or we have the mechanisms in place to do the best work in our communities, to provide a healing experience, an empowering experience for students rather than disempowering. You know, kids should come into our schools and be empowered and leave with courage to insert themselves into the world. We should be able to paint a picture of the world for our students and then give them the tools and the capacity to insert themselves in the world. And quite simply, this is really simple but powerful, is live a good life on this earth, right? We want all of our students to live a good life on this earth, a healthy life.
So, I know we're out of time. I want to do two things. Number one is just really understand that we're making a massive shift in terms of education in this state. This conference was about what even is proficiency-based education. How do we do it? What are we even talking about? We're just on the first steps. It will be more successful if we use a framework like this, where it fits within the bigger learning pattern than just the next new thing some legislature is making you do. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing is, since we're starting here, I want to get a picture of us and Jason with these guys in the background. Now, I don't know how to do this because I want to remember this moment. And then we want to be here with any questions or kind of get you guys away. So how do we do this? I'm seeing the wall. Whoa! Okay, smile, wave or something. There we go. Oh, wait. Oh, can we see them? Where's your family?
I got to put my gang in the back there.
Can we see them? Where are they? They ran away?
I don't know. Is that them?
That's them, I think. Okay, so thank you guys. We're here to answer any questions, but I know that it's a Sunday and you guys want to go home, so I just appreciate you being here and the work you guys are doing, so thank you.
And it's Father's Day.
And Jason and I will be in the back if you have any
Father's
questions.
Day.
Oh, hey, happy Father's Day.
So
Yeah,
my sons
happy
are here,
Father's
you
Day
have
to
to call
everybody.
me Father Jason now.
So Jason and I will be in the back if you have any questions, but we appreciate all that you guys are doing. So love you guys. You're awesome. We're going to turn it over to Trisha.
I'm going to be right up here.
Oh, there we go.
Good.
I've got Jason's here.
Can we get one more round of applause for our closing keynote? There we go. I want to share with you because over the course of this conference, which is, I hope you've had a good time. I hope you're walking away feeling like you've learned some new things, you have some ideas for where you can go next. I've been talking a fair bit over the course of the last couple days about the professional learning opportunities that Montana State and this team have put together using these one-time only funds that the Montana legislature made available in the 2021 legislative session. And so at the top of the funnel, you see again those single session workshops. If you have colleagues who are coming to the School Services of Montana and the Science Math Resource Center Summer Science Institute, which is taking place, there's handouts, flyers on the table outside. We're going to have a PBE workshop there, really focusing on STEM education. Some of you took advantage of Jeannie Chips's wonderful session earlier today. So invite them to come to the Science Summer Institute. Invite them to come find us in a single session workshop at MFPE at the Educators Conference. If you have school leaders coming to a SAM conference in the coming 6 months, come find us there at those single session workshops. You just took advantage of this multi-day workshop. We're interested in figuring out how might we do more of this. If we can be of assistance, of help in coming into your schools, working with your school leaders, your trustees, please reach out to us. For those of you individually who are like, I just want to dive deeper, I want to really understand at a deeper level what this looks like in action, we've talked about this 3-credit course, EDU 591, which is a graduate level seminar that is offered as a result of this funding at no cost of tuition and fees and can be counted towards a master's degree. So if you don't have a master's, or it can be counted towards your doctorate, if you're thinking, gosh, I'd really like to say I'm Dr. So-and-so. There are ways, and we want to support you. The funnel of influence gets tinier and tinier as we get deeper, but that pyramid of how much you're going to cover grows. You're going to know so much more about what does proficiency-based education look like if you visit and join this community of practice for a multi-week kind of experience. The course overview, again, is at our website. You can simply go to montana.edu/education/events. And if you select the personalized learning with competency-based education, you can learn more about the course. You can see what does that look like. This QR code will take you to a Google form where you're simply identifying your interest, and we'll follow up with you from there. This is the kind of feedback that we've heard from people who've taken the course. New doorways were opened. It was a chance to reflect on our practice, and I hope that the last 2 days have given you just that, a chance to reflect on your practice. And if you're feeling this way, like the second bullet point, I am very thankful that this course was offered to us by the Montana State Legislature. Please reach out to your legislator. Let them know how much it means to be invested in as teachers, as school leaders in your professional learning. It makes a difference. It's important that they know. And just in closing, I am so grateful that you took the time. A big shout out to all the dads out there. A big shout out to all of you who are not with the person who is the dad in your life or the dads in your lives. It's hard to figure out when to schedule a conference. Wow, is it hard, between orientation here on campus and the Office of Public Instruction Summer Institute starting up tomorrow morning. We tried to sandwich in, but I want you to know that this is the richest part. And the richest part are the people. They're the connections. They're the community of practice that we are starting to build here. And so I just want to thank you as we close out. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being ambassadors, being trailblazers, being innovators back in your schools and in your communities, because it's really not about teaching, it's about learning. And the learning of our kids and the learning that we do as we get better in our practice every day, committed to seeing what does the future hold.